Xiaolin Showdown is one of my favorite cartoons of all time. It was a great blend of action and comedy, with fights reminiscent of shonen anime, but with wacky cartoon humor and style. The final episode released in 2006, ending in a spot where you could totally see a lot more happening, but was executed so well, I consider it a pretty satisfying conclusion for the show. 7 years later in 2013, we got one of the most anticipated, yet infamous follow-ups of all time.
Xiaolin Chronicles!
This show is really weird. Like, would you believe me if I told you Omi does the Gangnam style here? You may notice right away the characters look slightly different. I actually kinda like Clay's redesign with the longer hair, maybe more than the original. Other characters don't really look as good for me, like Kimiko doesn't have a dress anymore, and her silhouette's a little bit weaker here, but also her pants are like the same color as her skin, so when I glance away and look back, I'm always like, oh my gosh, where are her pants? The concept art for the show looks really cool though. I can totally see why these designs were updated in this direction. And this brings me to one of today's biggest points. Animation is hard. I believe oftentimes when shows don't come out as amazing as we might expect, like Xiaolin Chronicles, there's a lot of factors going on behind the scenes, like production and budget issues we may not know about. Xiaolin Showdown wasn't picked up for more episodes after season 3, in large part from what I've read due to major budget cuts at Time Warner. This greatly impacted the animation department of Warner Brothers and Kids WB as a whole, but despite not being involved anymore, Warner Brothers still owned the copyright to major details of Xiaolin Showdown, causing changes to be made even to the names of the Shengon Wu, but not the characters or anything. I don't know how or why copyright works. Because of all these setbacks, Xiaolin Chronicles has one of the most interesting productions I'm aware of. In these archived newsletters, Christy Wee wrote about the show in 2013. She talks about how Chronicles was an international co-production, and we even see videos of Christy and the team in pre-production of the show in Paris. Due to budget and timing constraints, a lot of characters changed voice actors, with major roles doubled up on, like Clay and Chase sharing their new voice actor, David Kay. I definitely took a lot of the amazing talent on the original cast for granted. Like, did you know Clay was originally voiced by Jeff Bennett, who has done a lot of amazing roles, but none show his range as a voice actor more than Johnny Bravo.
Who's that handsome guy? Hello, 911 emergency? There's a handsome guy in my house. Oh, wait a second, cancel that. It's only me.
Daddy, I love you. But if you don't mind, zip your yap and let me get the job done my way.
Chase Young was voiced by James Marsden, and I was wondering why this name sounded familiar, and it occurred to me, if you've ever watched the show Jury Duty, he plays a very self-enthralled version of himself, and it's really funny for me to think, wow, this unsuspecting regular person is sitting next to the Chase Young.
I was looking at his socks over here. It looked like it said Sonic, and I'm in that movie Sonic. And I was like, does he have Sonic socks on?
Shit, you're in the movie Sonic? Yeah, that's the one with the new one with Jim Carrey, right? Yeah.
The most famous voice talent on the show has to be Tara Strong, who among her many famous characters reprises her role as Omi, and as a new character, Omi with green glasses. Yep, that's his name. I have a lot of thoughts on ping pong, and I figured the best way to go over this would be to just sit down and tell you about my thoughts on the whole show. I really didn't want to, but I thought no one's ever gonna watch Chronicles after this video. No one's even watched it before, maybe. Hopefully you can vicariously watch the show through this video and see once and for all what on earth happened with Xiaolin Chronicles. This was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do for the channel, so let's just jump into the first episode. So right away we're introduced to our familiar cast of dragon warriors, and then we have Dojo, who looks pretty similar except he's yellow now, which as a standalone design, the color choices aren't bad. He has a nice little gradient, and he looks a lot more frilly because his ear wing things got lost on his all-green original design. But like, of any color, did they really have to make him yellow? We're already gonna have two yellow spheres bouncing around. The Xiaolin warriors are scouting who will be their next apprentice, and this is where we meet Ping Pong, a smaller version of Omi with green glasses, whose real name is
Boris Antonio Rolf Jean-Pierre Gouligon, the first.
Ping Pong is a French orphan, and as far as we know isn't related to Omi, but I'd imagine it could have been a potential plot point to show they were related. Like, why else have two Omis on screen? Tara Strong voices both of them, which is interesting, but man, I just find it so annoying every time Ping Pong talks. I think a lot of people were really confused by this addition, like Ping Pong is the Wii U of characters. I don't know how many people just assumed Omi had shades on here, but you gotta admit, he do be kinda fresh though. We're introduced to mad scientist Jack Spicer and his ghostly accomplice Wuya, who seeks to regain her original form as a fine woman, and we get our first Shengon Wu rumblings here. The Bubble Brain, which allows the user to travel between metaphysical states. So the gang goes after the Shengon Wu and gets immediately distracted by this gal Willow, who's surrounded by these leech monsters. The episode goes down a little bit of a stale path of new gal joins the equation, the guys act stupid, and the other girl sees through it and is just called jealous and stuff. We get Omi's classic sexism, that girls don't have upper body strength, but I like that he at least says Kimiko's the exception, so that's progress, I guess. We get a big fight against Jack Spicer on this snowy mountain, resulting in our first Xiaolin Showdown of the show, with Jack and Ping Pong facing off. Jack uses his signature monkey spear, and Ping Pong uses the Orb of Torpedo, which is just the copyright name for the Orb of Tornami, the orb that gives the user the powers of water. Xiaolin Showdown's kinda like Avatar: The Last Airbender, in which the Dragon Warriors all control one of the four major elements. So the Orb of Tornami's powers were a little redundant or confusing when Omi uses it, cause he can just summon water anyways, but Ping Pong using it here makes sense. As the fifth character in the squad, Ping Pong actually controls the element of wood, which we never see in action. Like, he could have mastered the element of surprise and it would have been just as relevant in a fight. The showdown is a snowball fight, but much more notable is the transformation to CGI for all the showdowns in the series. They got a Tron thing going on with these neon full bodysuits, which looks fine at first, but gets boring pretty quickly. I'd imagine a lot more resources went into this very first showdown naturally, but when Chase Young gets involved, the shortcomings of the lighting and texturing are pretty apparent and terrifying. Ping Pong throws a snowball over Jack's head, which snowballs into an avalanche down the mountain, knocking Jack down and giving Ping Pong the win. Despite winning the showdown, Omi says it's too soon to announce him as the official apprentice, which we can infer is in part because Omi's jealous of Ping Pong, and in part because he has a crush on Willow. The episode ends with Willow talking to Chase Young in his lair, where we learn she's using a disguise and is actually a new antagonist, Shadow. It's nice to have a new antagonist, but Willow's attitude with the Xiaolin guys makes it even more apparent that the cast would have really benefited from another gal actually joining the cast, not just Omi, but younger. Ping Pong feels more like a mascot than a character, but I'm willing to keep the faith, mainly because he be dressing. Episode 2 has Willow flirting with Omi and the rest of the guys to get information to open the Shengon Wu vault. We see the animation can be really nice, like this little basketball sequence, and it makes me sad the showdowns don't look like this. The updates in technology between Showdown and Chronicles can be pretty noticeable at times, like with the colors and backgrounds being a bit brighter and cleaner, but this can also make it look a bit harsher at times. A new Shengon Wu appears, the Shroud of Monster camo, which turns the user invisible, and I wonder if the copyright issues affecting the names of the Shengon Wu also affected the design of the scroll Dojo uses to showcase the new talismans, because it's just a very empty composition with a little scroll wheel in the middle. Not having the actual text here can be hard at times since I have no idea what they're even saying half the time.
It's the Canon de Lopez Shengon Wu!
Willow uses the Shroud of Monster camo to turn invisible and make Ping Pong knock into the others, but because they don't see anything, they think Ping Pong must just be imagining this encounter with a shadowy figure. Ping Pong feels guilty for causing the monks to lose here and resigns from becoming Xiaolin apprentice, much to the benefit of jealous Omi and the scheming Willow, and Chase Young, who's doing way too much here. I don't think I've ever seen a villain go out of their way to dunk their head in water mid-evil laugh before. In episode 3, the monks find Ping Pong's diary he left behind, in which we learn he was an errand boy delivering mail between European monasteries. The creation of email made him obsolete, which is why he ended up as the apprentice audition in the first place. They also see Ping Pong's illustration of the shadow figure that caused him to lose, and Kimiko grows even more suspicious of Willow, eventually finding her at Chase Young's lair and her true form is Shadow. Kimiko and Ping Pong reunite, with Ping Pong being captured and Kimiko being loopy movie because she gets hit with some kind of galaxy gas Shengang Wu or something. The episode has a three-way showdown between Jack, Willow, and Chase. The environment looks pretty good, but I think the neon palettes and full bodysuits the characters wear definitely leave something to be desired. And Chase just looks cursed. Oh my gosh. I'd imagine animating the showdowns in CGI could potentially save a lot of money compared to high-quality 2D animation, and gives the show a unique edge to make people watch. It's a cool concept to change dimensions for showdowns, and my biggest overall gripe isn't that the showdowns look bad, but I think the choreography is pretty dull compared to the original show. Like here, showdowns seem just like a lot of running and jumping. There's not a lot of flair or complexity, which is most notable in the lack of story. At its best, Xiaolin Showdown's plots were implemented into the actual showdowns. Like in the original show, we have an episode where Kimiko's a hothead who gets distracted, therefore this race through a volcano has her Shengang Wu backfire until she finds her focus. There's not a lot of that underlying plot in Chronicles, but we end this showdown with Willow knocking Chase Young off the mountain and taking the Shengang Wu. Chase seems to be surprised Willow or Shadow does this, possibly foreshadowing her true nature, even Chase doesn't know. Later, Willow steals all the Shengang Wu from the vault, and the warriors find themselves surrounded by Chase and Willow, leading to a fight between Chase and Master Feng, which is an amazing idea. Chase turns into his dragon form here, which at first I kinda liked, but now I'm not sure if it looks more or less awkward than his original dragon design. Like, I think his anatomy is better, but his hair is a little bit goofy. I feel like the best design for Chase is somewhere between these two forms. Seeing fan art of Chase's dragon forms makes me see what they were going for more, cause some of these are badass. He's just a little goofy though. The deviant ROC Chase destroys the entire temple with the monks barely escaping, and Master Feng says the monks need to go on a journey and he's gonna go for a long walk. This is where the premise of the show really starts to unravel with very random plots. Like the fourth episode's all about these mystical golden bunnies that turn vicious when angry, and in the end when the monks save them, Master Feng just rides up on a cloud and says they got a piece to the puzzle of finding their new temple, and when Dojo asks how many pieces there are, Master Feng says IDK LOL and flies off. Kimiko and Clay get their own respective episodes, with Kimiko entering more of a virtual world, which doesn't really hit as hard when all the showdowns kind of look like this anyways. Like, even though the episode and showdown were 2D in the original, Kimiko's foray into the video game world there actually included a lot more game mechanics. Then in episode 6, we get an episode of Clay celebrating his grandpappy's 100th birthday with a hoedown, leading to this question from Omi.
Ooh, what is a hoedown? Showdown with hoes?
This Wild West episode's pretty odd, with Jack and Panda Bubba mutating cows with this growth hormone, and seeing Panda Bubba's new design is kind of odd. He's a lot more panda-like here, and I don't know how I feel about the paw pads on his hands and stuff. The episode actually ends in a really cool way, with Clay standing at the edge of a cliff, singing to soothe the cows just before they crash into him and all fall off the cliff. It's easily the highlight of the show so far, and one of the few times they build up a good amount of tension and threat. Clay's given a Shengang Wu passed down to him that allows him to summon Thunderhoof, who's actually kinda badass, I'll admit. He's just this giant flying horse, but with the My Little Pony cutie mark on his side. Like, with all the copyright hoops this show had to jump through, this feels like the most risky one. At this point, 6 episodes in, I'm mentally fatigued, but still on the fence. Like, maybe the show's gonna pick up from here. They've planted the seeds for so many new plot points and antagonists. For whatever reason, we also have 3 modes of transportation now, with Dojo, Thunderhoof, and this futuristic spacecraft that plays really obnoxious music whenever they ride it.
A little faster! A little slower!
That's fart synth. That's just fart synth. But I think episode 7 is where I realize things will only go down from here. A lot of random stuff happens, and I get a sensory overloaded to the point where I just see Jack and Wuya get pseudo-marriage counseling for their evil alliance from a chihuahua, and I say, no, yeah, that makes sense. Shadow and Chase get increasingly creepy, and I don't have an issue with this. Like, they're antagonists, they're supposed to be a little weird, but it's just so off-putting when they do this weird breathing thing into each other's mouths. Chase is pretty manipulative, but it feels pretty different to his original character. Like, in the original show, he tried to drive a stake between friends and deliberately lost showdowns for the big picture. But here his manipulation is like Shadow saying something rude and he strangles her, like it's giving Homer and Bart. Also, Chase technically created Shadow somehow with this little clamshell he pulled out of his body, adding a fresh new layer of hell to their dynamic. Really, my biggest issue with this episode is there's no story. It's just Jack teaming up with Shadow and Chase, Shadow calling Jack yummy, and Jack double crosses them, nearly ushering the world into a new period of darkness. Which is really cool. I wish that plot didn't start 15 minutes into the episode, like they all just yap, but we get a showdown between Kimiko and Shadow, and I believe this is the showdown that was used in the promotional video for Chronicles, as they showcase how Kimiko blinks and how her ponytail moves. And while the showdown may be a little bland, like they're just fighting inside a giant mangrove tree, it truthfully wouldn't matter how exciting the location or animation is, because the characters have no emotional tie to the showdown. They all establish beforehand this showdown's just kind of for fun, and they both intend to use the Shengon Wu to stop Jack. Shadow and Kimiko have nothing they want to overcome here, and looking back at examples that work from the original show, we have an episode that establishes Raimundo is cocky, and we see him lose at first, but his victory at the end of the episode is a product of his new attitude in studying. There's stakes involved to see how much the characters develop in regards to the main plot, but here there is no plot. Jack's taking over the world, and he's not even here. Why should I care whether Shadow or Kimiko wins? They have the same goal. And this feels like a very basic staple of structure, if not just storytelling in general, that we see countless times in Xiaolin Chronicles. I can excuse off-putting animation, lighting, texturing, voice acting, but it's really the absence of plot from so many episodes that makes the show just feel empty. There's good ideas throughout, but it just goes to show, writing and story isn't just having good ideas, it's also creating a good structure and framework that emphasizes and executes. Shadow wins the showdown and gives Kimiko the Shengon Wu anyways, then they track down Jack, take his Shengon Wu, and save the day. Episode 8 starts with Omi and Ping Pong training as insects, and it just looks cursed. We get a little training montage with Ping Pong where we see his potential working with all the warriors and their elements. We cut to Chase Young talking about how Ping Pong's a big threat, not only because of his talent with the different elements, but because he's pure and lacks ego. Omi and Shadow get into a showdown, which is just fighting in the big CGI mangrove tree we saw last episode. We'll see a lot of reused locations like this and the pirate ship, which is kind of funny. Like, making these environments had to take some time, they might as well reuse them. I just wish they had more relevance to the episodes, or they cycled between them a little more carefully. Like, there's a chess showdown that takes place on a pirate ship, and it just feels like a weird asset flip, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Omi turns into a small fly, twisting Shadow's tongue around her as she eventually cuts through the mangrove branch she was standing on, winning the showdown. Funnily enough, the episode cuts off here, but like, nothing was really established in the first 12 minutes. Why search for the rest of the episode? Especially when they put the showdown in the middle, not the end. So I'm just gonna move on. Sorry. Episode 9 is actually pretty enjoyable, as it reminds me more of the original structure of Showdown more than any episode so far. This infamous villain Salvador has been captured, and the monks need to escort him to prison. I don't know who needs their help or why, and I hardly remember what the warriors were even trying to do in the first place anymore. Aren't they trying to like find a temple or something? This show's just rotting my brain to the point where Dojo says he misses Master Feng, and I have to take a moment to remind myself that A, Master Feng isn't here for some reason, and B, this yellow thing talking is Dojo now. Salvador is known for being a great businessman who recruits the weak to become villains, and we see a flashback of him sweet-talking Dojo to be head of sanitation, aka just scrubbing toilets here, but as always, every new detail in this show gives me 2 more questions, like why was Dojo in the jungle with all these villains talking to Salvador in the first place? Salvador instantly forms a bond with Raimundo, who as we've seen can have a bit of an edge edge that makes him more susceptible to the dark side. Salvador recalls working in a sweatshop for 20 hours a day, which gives us Raimundo's backstory, in which he worked in a circus growing up, cleaning after elephants and being mistreated, which I actually think is a nice touch, since I don't recall any details about Raimundo's childhood or family ever. So Raimundo sympathizes with Salvador, convincing the group to take him to an amusement park and give him a few days of fun before he goes to prison. A Shengon Wu appears that's some kind of fart cannon gun thing, and Omi finds it in the desert in a scene that actually looks really cool. The sand and particles and wind are just so cool here. Though it is a bit random, like why is Omi venturing through the desert so dramatically? This shot was used in the promotional trailer for Xiaolin Chronicles, which makes sense. It's mysterious and cool and looks great, so I do kind of wonder if they played it up for a big trailer shot or something. Omi gets into a showdown with Chase that I don't really care for still, because why are they fighting in an episode about Raimundo and Salvador? They fight in this big CGI pirate ship with really weird shots and frame rate, but they at least experiment with a cool combination of sketchy 2D elements in the CGI showdowns here. Not the most effective incorporation, but the CGI in the show sometimes actually looks decent, and right as I say that, Chase looks horrifying and doesn't even try to lip sync here.
Like I said, your little thingamajig is no match for true evil.
Chase wins the showdown and gives the fart cannon to Omi, and everyone celebrates Omi's win. Like, I don't think it's worth celebrating a pity win here, calm down. Salvador removes his handcuff to Raimundo by just removing his arm and regenerating it, cause he's part Komodo dragon, and we get a pretty fun hand-to-hand combat scene with all the warriors versus Komodo Salvador in the middle of a circus. I know I just criticized the showdowns for taking place in the middle of the episode, but here there's an actual story to keep me invested still, so I can accept it here. Salvador's lizard design is really funny to me, and I don't know why. Like, it kind of reminds me of Gex, but with his mustache and necklace that make him look a little more like an OC. I don't know how to describe it. For one of the first times in the series, the gang uses their elements to defeat Salvador, taking him to prison. The episode ends with Raimundo being gifted the Eye of the Komodo Dragon talisman from Salvador, which is a sweet touch, because the two share a lot of interesting parallels. Overall, one of the best episodes of the season, in large part because it had a good story and structure. The showdown's pretty inconsequential and just randomly inserted into the middle of the episode, but we have a good 2D fight in the circus that makes up for it. Episode 10 starts with the warriors fighting Chase and Shadow near an erupting volcano, as they then turn the warriors into regular cats, not warrior cats. The featured Shengon Wu today is the Cheetah Claws, which is like the Chronicles version of the Golden Tiger Claws, but it seems to have a little more of a time and space element to it, not just a teleportation feature. This causes Dojo and Omi to teleport back to the past, where they warn Grandmaster Dashi Chase becomes evil. He doesn't even react to Omi being here from the future, he just warns him Chase's strength is also his weakness. Also, he has a pretty pale complexion. I always thought his yellow skin was foreshadowing he's Omi's ancestor, but the family tree in this show gets so much more screwed up than you could ever imagine. Anyways, Omi goes back to the present and gets into a showdown with Chase in the volcano. There's no real objective, they just say the game is lava hopping, so I guess they're just playing the floor is lava, literally. And oh my gosh, Chase looks worse and worse every showdown. What am I looking at? The showdown's alright, it's a little slow and choppy, but it's decent from an action and choreography perspective. Omi remembers Master Dashi's saying about Chase's strength being weakness and pushes him off a rock, but I don't exactly get why this works here. Maybe you could make the argument Chase's desire for power left him open to an attack, but the moral's kinda lost here, and there's not much plot outside of the action. After Omi's victory, all the Shengon Wu combine together and open a magic portal that creates a temple and unseals a princess trapped inside. Things just get thrown so far out of left field, it can be really hard to follow, but hey, at least they found a temple, I think. They were trying to do that, or something. Episode 11 starts with a meteor crashing into the courtyard of the new temple, and I would have never guessed a green mini dojo from the future would show up. But I actually really like seeing what Dojo would have looked like if he was green in the show. He actually looks so much better, and the little gradients are such a nice touch. Like, why did they go out of their way to make him neon yellow? Mini Dojo says the regular dojo is a great dragon leader in the future, proving his future origins by pointing out a new Shengon Wu about to appear. This leads to a showdown between Clay and Jack, which again is just kinda random, but this is the first time we've seen Clay fight all season, which is kinda crazy 11 episodes in. I do like the stripe on the cowboy hat here, it is a pretty interesting outfit. Clay and Jack race through floating haystacks in space, searching for the quantum wand Shengon Wu, and it looks and feels like a Mario Sunshine fever dream. Jack ends up beating Clay here, and the quantum wand sends the cast to the future, where we see Dojo as leader, and humans are enslaved, paralleling the warrior's treatment of Dojo throughout this episode, asking him to do their laundry and chores and stuff. There's just an uneasy feeling I have though when Dojo makes an I have a dream speech to free the enslavement of dragons, and then we find out he was being manipulated by his great-great-great-grandson, with the mini green Dojo actually wearing the communist red star hat. Like, what are we trying to imply here? The episode ends with the gang going back to the past and saying they'll be more mindful of their dragon friend, and it kinda reminds me of the episode where Dojo single-handedly saved the day from the Sapphire Dragon freezing everyone. This episode had potential, but is just a little bit convoluted. It was hard for me to keep up at times. Like, I'm not even mentioning this random guy dressed as a dragon and turns the other warriors in for being here. In episode 12, there's an extremely powerful green monkey talisman that threatens the world, activating in the land of 1001 miseries where no one's ever returned from. There's this magician guy who traps the warriors and Jack in a room, and it looks like it would play out like a fun game show, but it's really just falling through tunnels and stuff for way longer than necessary. We get a chess showdown where Omi and Jack team up against the magician, which is a great idea for a showdown. You know, the situation is serious if good and bad guys team up. The chess showdown actually works well within the context of the episode too, where they've debated rushing into the land of miseries or slowing down and coming up with a plan, which shows itself through Omi's struggling chess, but Master Feng echoes in like Professor Oak when you try to ride a bike indoors and says to calm down and that forethought wins. This makes Omi good at chess all of a sudden, and then Omi says, wait, you said no rules, and just starts smashing stuff. There's a lot of push and pull with what's being said and done, but I appreciate the chess terminology used throughout, like the Sicilian defense and en passant, but showdowns really just feel like smashing things together and praying for the best, both metaphorically and literally. Omi ends up winning, they escape the land of miseries, and Shadow and Chase watch from their pondering orb. Shadow begins to question her existence, showing the audience some of the first signs of her free will and independence, ending the episode with arguably the deepest quote of the whole show. Episode 13 has the monks cleaning the temple and encountering this giant tree, Barky, the guardian of the temple and the last Xiaolin dragon of wood. We don't know why he got turned into a tree, and we never will know, so that's cool, I guess. Barky was mentioned for a split second in the first episode during an information overload I only noticed on like the second or third time watching, and there was a big fight with Chase all the warriors compete in. And I really think this is the first time we've seen Raimundo in CGI, and it's for under 5 seconds. He probably has the most boring 3D design here. They rehashed the old plot of the warriors facing their deepest fears, which is a bit different here. Omi still fears squirrels, and it's a little more of a ninja squirrel now. Clay's grandma is a bit different, more zombie-like here, and instead of fearing a doll, Kimiko fears this gal Seiko, who's mad at Kimiko because she talked to her boyfriend, which Kimiko says was just giving him the answers for the math homework. Raimundo's fear was originally a man-o-war or a jellyfish. This made sense since he was a surfer from Brazil, which you'd never be able to guess in Chronicles, so they make his fear a circus clown, which actually makes a lot of sense given his childhood and backstory. Other than this, I really have little to say about the episode. It ends with Ping Pong being given his own wood Shengon Wu, but he never uses the wood element, so I don't care, let's just move on. In episode 14, Master Feng's visiting the temple, and Dojo's given the Ring of Katsumi, which makes 9 copies of the holder. Ping Pong appreciates this, since this will help him complete his chores more efficiently, but I would have never guessed Ping Pong would use this to play Quidditch, which is pretty funny, I guess. Also, this ring was given to Dojo by Willow, aka Shadow, because the Shengon Wu can easily backfire if not used responsibly. And like, does he know Willow is Shadow? Am I missing something here? Dojo's dragon clones are kind of funny, like what's with this Etch-a-Sketch one? Chase catches Ping Pong and turns him into some loopy, Stitch-like creature, and then he gets locked up and pleased to be freed by shapeshifting into different people, like that one time in Showdown where Dojo nearly took over the world by doing this. I can accept this episode mashing together 2 previous episodes of Xiaolin Showdown, but everything just feels so random and inconsequential. What was the point of making clones this episode? It has no impact on the narrative, whether it be not spreading yourself thin or not offloading your chores to Ping Pong. We eventually reach a showdown with Ping Pong and Chase Young on a billiards table on top of a pirate ship, and hey, you gotta get your money's worth out of that ship. It probably wasn't cheap. Maybe. It's just kinda weird and chaotic. Nothing really develops to cause Ping Pong to defeat Chase. He never even really had an issue with spreading himself thin. The showdown had no clones, no unhinged alien. It was just kind of annoying.
Worked out perfectly, didn't it?
Bite me.
Okay, that's the highlight of the episode for me. Episode 15 has Kimiko's sister Tomoko showing up, and Kimiko isn't pleased because growing up, she never had time for Kimiko. I have no idea how old Tomoko is, since the only video we see of their relationship is Kimiko being sad as a 5-year-old on her birthday when her older sister couldn't make it because she's a spy or something. She looks exactly the same as she does now though, so I don't know if that's like part of the plot, but Tomoko makes some kind of alliance with Chase Young, stealing a Shengon Wu from the Warriors and giving it to him. And then we find out in the end she was just double-crossing Chase because the Onyx Eye Shengon Wu, when combined with the Mask of the Green Monkey, would close all the interdimensional portals, and she's like an interdimensional spy that uses these. It doesn't really hit all that hard. When all these plot elements are thrown into this episode, it would have been cool to see Kimiko have more tension or even a showdown with her sister, but it's whatever. We move. Episode 16 revolves around the Hanzo Mirror, a Shengon Wu that can reverse the nature of whom it reflects, which would revert Wuya back to her human form. Jack ends up getting the Shengon Wu and reflects it here, becoming the good version of Jack that we've seen a couple times before. Meanwhile, the Warriors get some kind of service achievement award, and it's just so weird. Like, I have no idea what's happening with this show anymore. Are they still traveling around now that they built this temple? Who's giving them a Xiaolin award? Is Master Feng still on his walk? Dojo isn't involved in the award, so he gets sad and hitchhikes through the desert, eventually lying down to become roadkill. But the new good Jack finds and saves Dojo, as we see he's got some kind of cult he's cultivated. Dojo, who now goes by the name Jack, because Jack's whole cult chants "We are Jack," teams up with Jack Spicer, and we get a showdown between Jack and Omi. It's kind of crazy to say this is the first showdown in the entire show that actually has stakes behind it, since if Jack wins, they'll be able to free Wuya from her ghostly form. I guess it's sorta interesting they gave Jack a different outfit to reflect his all-white suit this episode, but they didn't even try putting a little texture on it, or even just a black line for his tie and stuff. So he just kinda looks like an untextured model, which is kinda funny. During the showdown, Jack reverses back into his evil self, walking right up to the Shengon Wu, and I'm kinda glad I can't force myself to be invested here, cause like, what is he doing? This would make me so mad, just grab it. The crew says they missed Dojo, and they couldn't have done it without him, and it's like, done what? Beat Jack in a one-on-one showdown? It's just such a disconnected show. Every episode feels like 3 6-minute subplots mixed and matched together, with a random showdown in between. In episode 17, Dojo's upset Master Feng's being unfaithful to him, as we see his old friend Rocco is shining Feng's head and stuff. The gang goes to drag Dragontopia to see Master Feng, and I have no idea why he doesn't teach them anymore. I really wish he would, so Dojo could have a single line that isn't saying how much he loves and misses Feng. We then see Rocco and Master Feng playing Twister, and it's like, nah, he's definitely cheating on you. Playing Twister is the most intimate, non-cheating cheating out there. The warriors get turned into zombies, and Dojo and Rocco have to save everyone, and they get into a showdown with Chase and Shadow, where they fight as zombie Clay and Rai, which is kinda ingenious since making a CGI model for these two characters would have been a lot of work for one quick showdown, where, quite frankly, very little happens. I like how we have a zombie Raimundo before a regular CGI Raimundo fight. I can't even tell it's him. It does feel a bit derivative of the Chuck E. Chew episode from the original show, but also one of the few episodes so far with a competent structure, and by competent, I mean having a beginning, a middle, and an end. I'm really not asking for that much. In episode 18, our old friend Lemime shows up, whose design definitely downgrades in this series, but what else is new? We get a new character who actually has an interesting design, this masked cowboy Patty. Get it? Like a cow patty? Honestly, I'd watch a whole show with him. He's got a cool design. Interestingly enough, they give Patty a CGI model to fight Clay, though he seems to be Clay's model with horns instead of a hat. They both cover their faces enough that it's not terribly noticeable. Patty beats Clay, and we learn that he's Clay's younger brother. Patty eventually gets kidnapped by Lemime, and the warriors enter this hideout to get him, where all these little mimes break Patty's legs with baseball bats. It's really disappointing Clay doesn't beat the mime through outwitting him. Clay was depicted as very simple and aloof, but under the hood was a pretty clever guy who thought outside the box, metaphorically and literally. But he really doesn't do anything in Chronicles. But at least the resolution has Clay and Patty come together to save the day. That's right, I'm pleasantly surprised when the show follows basic narrative and structure 18 episodes in. Episode 19 has Omi sad he has no family and no mail addressed to him, and we've already had this episode before, but it takes a weird twist and just immediately turns into Jack Spicer saying, hey, I don't have family or friends either, can I join the temple? The biggest plot twist is learning what episode they're gonna repeat here. Chase Young lays an egg that Jack steals, betraying Omi, Shadow ends up finally betraying Chase, and they get this Clown World showdown, which is so weird not only in concept, but how it looks. Like, if this came out in 2024, I would have 100% assumed this was AI generated. Something about the soft shading, choppy frame rate, and just overall random, incoherent aspects. I know showdowns are kind of random in their premises, but this is a bit much. The episode ends with Omi defeating Shadow and returning this egg to Chase, who in return reveals a secret to Omi. I was gonna jokingly say he says, I'm your father, but he actually says he's Omi's family here, which is a bit of a cheap shock value plot twist. But I don't know, it's a cool concept. They're both pretty honorable characters in their own ways, but you know what they say, ideas are a dime a dozen. And the execution of this idea is non-existent because they never even mention the fact they may be related ever again. Now is probably a good time to say most people don't consider this show canon at all, so I almost see this as a fun idea for a fan fiction. Also, Ping Pong flashes Kimiko for no reason. Episode 20 has a new villain, Tiny Sim, show up who can make his drawings come to life. He makes these weird weasels and teams up with Jack, and he's voiced by Tara Strong, so it's nice to see her do a voice that isn't Omi or Ping Pong in the show.
I will become the evil Weaselinator.
Like, it didn't even occur to me these lines were by the same voice actress. No real story or problem occurs here, just mindless running and jumping, and Jack gets into a showdown with Kimiko where they try to be the first to tickle this giant panda. And it's one of the most heinous designs I've ever seen. Like, I know it's the point, but the gross out humor between having a panda with forests for armpits and Dojo having exploding pimples whenever a Shengan Wu appears are just a bit exhausting. And I know I'm not the demographic for the show, but it's still fun to observe, which is why I try to be a little more neutral than just angry making these videos, but I do think there's an interesting point to be made that Chronicles came out 7 years after the original show, and it feels like it actually skewed to a slightly younger demographic than the original, which could definitely factor into why a lot of fans felt alienated here from the original show. Episode 21 is a Christmas special where we see Omi's backstory again, that he doesn't really have any family, and we see part of why he's such a skilled warrior is because he trained year-round, even when the others were away during holidays. This parallels Jack Spicer once again, who talks about how, despite living in a nice house, his family was rarely ever present, so the episode sets up a nice dichotomy of two characters in very different circumstances that share a similar backstory. Which is a cool concept, but the episode ultimately boils down to Jack stealing Christmas. Santa's like a jacked Terminator here, and Omi defeats Jack in a showdown where they just run and jump on ornaments and the day is saved. I thought I'd have a little more sympathy for Jack, like they try to show a couple times that they even wish him a Merry Christmas, but I don't know. It just feels cold and distant. The characters don't have deep enough desires or anything. The episode has some of the best visuals in the show, oddly enough, and the showdown for one of the only times in the whole show is relevant to the episode, having Jack and Omi fight around a giant Christmas tree and jumping from ornament to ornament. It looks like I'm just watching someone play Fall Guys. There's not much flair to it at all. During the showdown, Santa tells Omi to use his gift to win, which is just a candy cane, perhaps going to show the magic of Christmas is in the eye of the beholder, or something. I have no idea. I think they were half trying to make a Star Wars joke, like use the Force, use the gift. Let's just move on. In episode 22, Master Fung gets shrunken down and is saved by Jack Spicer before he's picked off in the desert. This lets Jack sorta be a friend of the temple for a minute, while small Master Fung gets drunk off the fruit punch and parties hard. You may have noticed this is the third of the last 4 episodes that really tries to make Jack a part of the team, or at least really hammer down that he and Omi aren't too different in their past experiences. But it really just makes me think about what several people commented on my original videos, is that they believe Jack was originally going to join the team as the Dragon of Metal. This would have been such a cool concept, and the new villains would have maybe given room for Jack to join the side of good. Ping Pong joining the team didn't eliminate this possibility since his element is wood, but the elements are so insignificant now anyways, I just wanted to share what could have been. We eventually get a showdown between Jack and Master Fung, which is a great concept, but the only issue is Master Fung is both tiny and invisible here, so it's literally just Jack fighting an After Effects particle. Another fine concept for a showdown, but it just looks like a very cheap corner cut here. I really do sympathize with the team creating a showdown on a much smaller budget after making a great show that didn't get renewed by the network, so the fact this show was created at all is truly a feat to be proud of, but I think the shortcomings of Xiaolin Chronicles are a testament to how much work goes into creating animated shows and how much compromise is needed at a network level. It's safe to say the vast majority of the industry, including this show, are very talented. Like, I don't think this show flopped due to a lack of talent, but it's interesting to speculate why and how this happened. Master Fung wins the showdown, Chase chokes out Shadow for not succeeding in her plan, getting increasingly abusive as this goes on, and Shadow foreshadows her big escape plan. Shadow has the best story arc in the show, a villain trying to escape her abusive partnership with another villain while also wondering who she is and why she was created, but I think they killed a lot of what made Chase Young so interesting from the original series. He wasn't really a character who was angered in defeat, in large part because defeat seemed to always be a part of his plan, and he was so honorable, you get the feeling that he might not have been really that evil. Here they turn him into a Saturday morning villain who's just evil for the sake of evil, and the most character depth he has is being sensitive when he laid an egg. And while that may sound like we have a hint of depth in the series, it's more of a pregnancy joke than a character moment. We got 4 episodes left, we gotta ignore the prego jokes and just move on. Episode 23 is probably the funniest and most comprehensive episode of the series. It starts out with the monks doing a talent show, like Kimiko performing the famous Stella scene from A Streetcar Named Desire, featuring a cutout of Jack Spicer. This is one of the only times I genuinely smiled or chuckled in the series. I really have to admit that's a great joke. Omi shows off his acrobatics, jumping through rings of fire to get perfect 10s, but Ping Pong wins the crowd over with his singing, and just listen for yourself.
This is my rendition of In the Good Old Summertime.
In the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, strolling through the shady lanes with your baby mine.
So Omi's really jealous and upset and leaves the temple over losing the competition, and I love how no one cares. They're just like, "'Kay, bye." Jack Spicer also enters the competition, and we see it was a ploy to steal some Shengon Wu that'll make Wuya whole again. Shadow ends up defeating Omi, Ping Pong, and Monkey Jack, who look absolutely cursed from a side view, allowing Shadow and Wuya to team up and end the episode. So this episode actually gives us some genuinely funny moments, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the plot of Wuya being back to her original form plays out, because there's not been many overarching stories in the series so far. Like, tell me why Omi and Chase haven't talked at all about being related, when it was supposed to be some big truth bomb. Imagine if Darth Vader said, "I might be related to you," and then this was never mentioned ever again. I don't know, I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. I met a close friend of mine a decade ago because I thought Luke Skywalker turned into Darth Vader when he was angry or something. The final 3 episodes of Xiaolin Chronicles are more like one big finale, and what better way to start off this mini arc than Omi dancing to Gangnam Style.
I will show you my Gundam dance move. Sexy lady. Sexy dancing butt. Cool Gangnam move, Omi-sai. Gallop butt trot.
Well, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Fine, I'll continue, but you better like and subscribe. I had to suffer through this for you, so please like and subscribe. The plot actually picks up a lot here, with Kimiko getting visions of a red dragon, but no one believes her. Chase Young uses the Mask of the Green Monkey to try opening this portal of heroes, where he'll be able to steal the chi of all the dragon warriors from the past. So Kimiko enters the Shengon world to fight Chase Young, and we see the red dragon helps her fight here, ultimately leading to the Chi Temple of this world that Chase Young has now infiltrated. We see Chase talk with the spirit of Master Monk Guan, you know, the guy who betrayed these warriors and nearly got Dojo eaten by Chase to get his spear back, only for us to learn in a later episode he has hundreds of them. Monk Guan being a Chi spirit actually makes sense here, since a big plot hole fans pointed out of the original show was that Chase was doing what he did. Since a big plot hole fans pointed out of the original show was that Chase was doing what he did for eternal life for like 1,000 years, why was Monk Guan also in the present? The show actually gives Chase some great backstory and lore here, as we see one of the major reasons Chase left the temple was to preserve his power, which would be harnessed to power up and create Shengon Wu. I never really thought about where Shengon Wu come from and why they're here, but this is such cool lore to me. It really makes sense why Chase is so against Shengon Wu, almost always refusing to use these so-called trinkets and showdowns. And it kinda does make me wonder if Chase hates Shengon Wu because they're gonna take his chi, or if he didn't want to give his chi because he saw Shengon Wu as crutches for the weak. Kimiko goes to the land of the dragons, where she meets Munada, the water dragon from the 999th generation, who asks Kimiko to take the next step as the chosen Shaolin dragon warrior. I don't really know why she was chosen specifically, like, at least when Raimundo was chosen to be the leader at the end of Xiaolin Showdown, he clearly had the most character development, and the story arcs revolved a lot around him. Kimiko has hardly done anything in Chronicles, there wasn't any character development or really anything she overcame. Also, Omi tries to fight Kimiko for the Dragon Rider spot, which is crazy, and he's just really annoying here. I don't think Omi's ever been happy for anyone that's not him ever. We learn another reason Chase resents the Shaolin way is because he tried to bond with a dragon and she rejected him for his brother. This insinuates Chase may not be pure of heart, which I mean I would assume we already know, but it's an interesting addition to the backstory, I suppose. The episode ends with Chase Young showing up nearly invincible with a glowing green aura around him from the spirits of the enslaved dragon warriors, and I'm really grooving on these last couple episodes. They've added some nice elements to the lore and world building, and details remain episode to episode. You know, unlike Chase saying him and Omi are related, cause we'll never know more about that, I guess. Before we get into the final episode, I wanted to give a friendly reminder to like and subscribe, let me know what shows you want me to talk about in the future, and a quick thanks to my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Buggy, Luca17, Jack C, Looter, Richard M, Flinley, and Paul H. Your support means so much to me and has helped me share Xiaolin Chronicles with the world. Don't cancel because of that. Thank you. So in the final episode, Chase Young shows up, stealing Kimiko's dragon helmet and becoming giant. But the water dragon tells Kimiko she can save the world by awakening this sleeping cosmic dragon, Tai Shui. Also, to awaken him, they need to use the purest of their elemental powers, which would be Omi's mastery of water. So Kimiko and Omi will have to team up to awaken the dragon. It's a good enough reason for me to bring Omi along. Like, you gotta have the main character involved in the finale somehow, but hammering home Omi's the best user of his element makes it feel all the more random Kimiko is chosen here. Chase sends these dragons made of chi after Omi and Kimiko as he slices open the sky to reveal this cosmic dimension. Chase turns into a dragon himself that confronts Tai Shui, who basically just says, "Sorry Chase, I've already drawn you as the Beta-gon and myself as the Chad-gon."
No, Chase Young. Not today, and not this way. Try me!
Also, is that Bowser's laugh from Mario 64? What is going on? We do get a kinda badass scene where Tai Shui turns into a surrounding wall of eyes that shoots lasers at Chase, saying they embody the cosmos and can't be destroyed. This looks like some kind of biblically accurate angel in a way, and is actually pretty cool. So Chase is defeated, and Omi and Kimiko are given gifts, which is the Orb of Torpedo, which we learn grows more and more powerful each generation of warriors as they put their strength into it. Also, Omi will create his own Shengon Wu, and I really wanted to see what he'd create, because again, it's a cool concept with little execution, or they didn't really get around to it. Kimiko's given a pendant that resembles the one her sister gave her, which is an interesting plot point and mystery that we'll also never know the answer to, since there's no more show after this. I kinda feel like they might not ever follow up on it even if there was more show, but one point they do follow up on is Wuya and Shadow teaming up. They do just a bunch of random stuff and it truly leads to nothing this season, though it does end with Wuya attacking the Temple Guardian lady, who we learn is responsible for turning Wuya into a ghost in the first place, along with Master Dashi. Shadow's upset Wuya betrayed her, but I have no idea how Wuya actually betrays Shadow here, and I've watched this episode like 2.5 times, which is 3 times more than I should have, so let's just call it there. That was Xiaolin Chronicles. These last few episodes were actually pretty decent. They really upped the stakes in action and were somewhat reminiscent of the original show. There's still some issues like the day getting saved by the Dragon of the Cosmos isn't that satisfying. It's a character we've seen for a minute and known for about 5, and defeats the villains we've dealt with for 26 episodes. It's kinda sad that if they were to have a Xiaolin Showdown in the finale of this season, it'd greatly decrease the quality with the uncanny CGI, but that's how things go down. I don't know if the CGI was a creative twist or a way to save money, but I think it's at least a bit of both. And you can really see the passion and excitement the group had in the behind the scenes newsletters, even if the things they were doing were a bit basic perhaps. The showdowns didn't look good then, and have aged terribly without good lighting or textures, but truly the worst part of Xiaolin Chronicles is how they fail to include the plot of the episode within most showdowns. It's a pretty disappointing show coming off of one of my favorite shows of all time, and Chronicles may be one of the worst shows I've ever completed a watch through of. It's just boring and random and doesn't even follow its own plots half the time. But on the bright side, the backgrounds look nice, there's some talented voice actors that return, and there's a couple new designs I like as much, if not more, than the originals, like Clay and maybe Chase Young's new dragon form. At the end of the day, animation is hard, even if you have a talented staff. I'll always say, it's a miracle we see anything on the screen at all, and while I dislike the show, I commend the effort of Christy Wee and the rest of the team for trying to keep it alive. Even in the 2020s, we've seen Christy has been hinting at a new Xiaolin reboot called Xiaolin Dragons, but it's kinda died down as of the last year or two. Online we can see Christy has other endeavors she's worked on, such as directing a documentary called 9 Dragons Tea, all about the history of tea, and Flying Phillies, a book about women's Air Force service pilots from World War II. So needless to say, Christy is a very talented, hardworking woman, and as a fan of the original series, I appreciate her efforts. I don't feel my love for Xiaolin Showdowns impacted by Chronicles, but hoo boy, this was a long one. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next week. Alright, bye.